Excellent, thank you. So now we're going to be talking to Tom Jordan for his live Q&A for his interoperability update. Pre-recording, hopefully everybody did the homework for that one as well. We continued right from the Badger Analytics conversation. If you dropped in late and you heard the end of that one, they are very enmeshed and pieces of the same project. So it made sense to have them both together, but still have time for each other. So we'll take questions for Tom. You can type them in the chat, or if you want to unmute and talk, that's okay too. We will have, you can also put your questions in the WebEx area. I'll be keeping an eye on that as well. Tom, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. For anybody that didn't make the recorded session, I'm Tom Jordan. I'm the lead architect for our interoperability effort, which is really focusing on changing some of the approach to getting data into applications and getting people into applications. So a strong focus on integration technologies like API, event, and integration platform types of strategies for data integration with applications, and a lot of focus around identity and access management to control access to services, broker access to services, improve the way that we get people access to activate accounts, access to applications, and things like that. We're deploying, I think, 7 new infrastructure components as part of the Interop program. And so, it's a very large, broad effort. It feels like we're not going as fast as any of us would like to be going, but it's also, looking at the size of the project and the volume of what we have to do. We can look back a year and see the ground that we've covered. So that's, that's somewhat satisfying too. I joke around that, like, the second half of my career is going to be fixing what I did in the first half of my career. And so it's kind of feeling like that, Yep.
Well, you'll be helping me.
But that's
the same thing in my career.
But really, this is, the arc that we're on with probably both this and the data warehouse work is, it's not measured in years. It might even be measured in decades, so it's an evolutionary type of thing. And so, we all just have to temper our expectations, I think. Oh, Scott, thank you. I appreciate that.
This is a really weird detail question, but a secure agent was mentioned in both presentations.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can
right.
you define
yeah.
that a little bit?
So a secure agent sounds confusing until you figure out what it actually is. Like, with Informatica Intelligent Cloud Services, which is a integration platform is kind of the category of software that it's in. And it's got like lots of neat stuff to be able to move data from one place to another, create an API or event-based integration from one system to another. But there's got to be something somewhere in there that actually moves the data, that logs into a database, grabs a record, and then pushes that record somewhere else. And in the Informatica landscape, that's what the secure agent does. The secure agent is it's a client application that runs where you decide that you want it to run. So a nice thing about Informatica's Intelligent Cloud Services secure agent model is that you can get around a lot of firewall problems by running a local secure agent or running a secure agent inside your secure network to be able to access a data source and not have to open a firewall rule to get to that data source. So if, for example, I had data that I wanted to push from a private database into Amazon's S3 storage service, I could run the secure agent within my secure perimeter and only have an outgoing connection to S3 in order to do that. We do have situations where we've run, the secure agent on Amazon Container Services, for example. So we can choose where to run it, but that's really what it is. It's a thing that actually does the work that you specify in an Informatica integration. And yes, Jeff, you're absolutely right. An insecure agent would definitely be a problem. Secret agent is even better.
Other questions coming up? Or somebody want to unmute and challenge Tom on something? How do you feel it's going, Tom? I know there's like, it's slow, but
You know, it's funny because like I said, you know, when you look at the arc of the project, we're making progress. It seems like the stress point moves every 3 months or so. Like, you know, a different part of the problem is, or a different part of the project is a problem. But we're moving through it. To David's question, when can we start using it? There are some pieces that are available right now. The Informatica stuff is ready for campus consumption. We've got onboarding documentation out there. The identity and API stuff, we're in the kind of infrastructure build out phase. And so it's looking more like fall, winter that we would have products that other folks would be able to use in that. What we're really doing now is infrastructure deployment and stuff like that. We had some contractor challenges with the API deployment that have slowed us down a little bit. But that's kind of a lot of what we're digging into with that right now. In terms of preparing to use it, again, what I'd kind of underscore with that is, like, you know, if you're going through a re-architecture, a big system change or something like that, loop us into the conversation and we can help you talk about what the future might look like. David, I know one of your interests might be around the idea of provisioning and deprovisioning access to services. One thing we found in Do It is that, like, you know, we've got to sit down and figure out our access control rules, not just from a technology standpoint, but from a business standpoint. And you'd think that the question of, like, who should get access to what is one that you'd have an easy answer to, and we don't. It's taken a lot of work just to kind of unpack all of those, who gets access to what, under what circumstances. The more that we can be explicit about that stuff, the more we're going to be able to automate it. And so if you're thinking about your services and how to approach provisioning and deprovisioning those services at an enterprise level, you know, that's like one of the key things is being clear about what your rules are. We've had a lot of situations where we found that, like, you know, the service owner, the owner of the service said, well, clearly it's the identity team that defines that. And the identity team said, well, clearly it's the service provider that defines that. And it was something that somebody coded a decade ago, maybe me, maybe John Miner or somebody like that. And, you know, that's what we've been using. So yeah, documenting that stuff is going to make the identity pieces easier to move forward with. Jeremy raises the question, like, what's a student? We're not presuming an answer for that. What we really want to get to with that is to give people something between, you know, completely canned and no ability to move within a system, and completely bespoke and you have no guidelines to be able to start with anything. So what we're angling towards with regards to service populations are some broad buckets defined that fit a lot of our common criteria, and the ability to be able to extend those or modify those if necessary. So maybe here's what we use as a definition of student for our collaboration suite of tools and, you know, things like that. And if you need to depart from that, we'll provide mechanisms to be able to do that, either to add different groups to that or subtract different groups from that to define, like, you know, how is a CS student different or an engineering student different or things like that, because they may be broader or narrower than, you know, some higher level institutional definition.
Well, Alan,
I agree 100%, David, that the service provider should know who is eligible. I can tell you that even, you know, internally for us, that hasn't always been the case.
back up to Ellen's question. Will Do It provide the secure agent for people that don't want to host their own or run their own?
That's a good question. I would refer that to the EI team. The short answer for that is Kathy will smile. it depends. You know, because it's gonna get down to like, where does that secure agent have to live? What kind of data will it be handling? One of the things that the secure agent is nice for is being able to separate things out into different security and audit domains. So if you have a security agent that's handling public health or like, you know, private health information, you can put it in a box and have it not handle anything else. If we have a shared agent and then one of the users of the shared agent is running PHI through that, suddenly everything the agent handles is within that audit scope. So we just want to have a conversation about that and know, you know, what is that agent doing so that we have the right balance of security and compartmentalization and stuff like that. EI is enterprise integrations. That's Charlie Calderon's team.
Thank you for asking that, Porter. I would have not known what EI was.
We
Any,
do that. The Charlie's team does have a templated deployment of the secure agent. So if you wanted a like a you know a Docker version of it that was capable of running in Amazon, they've done a lot of work in that space, and you know, be happy to share that work with you. Informatica is an interesting tool. I think the things that we found are, it's really good at the things that it was, you know, kind of designed for, replicating data from one place to another. It's nice to be able to interface with systems for which there are predefined connectors. You know, various Amazon services, there's a Salesforce connector, various other things. Those are really nice out of the box. We've run into a couple of, you know, interesting things where it doesn't always mesh the best with like a DevOps deployment methodology. It's versioning is a little bit cumbersome with it. Tracking your integrations and version control are, you know, it's not the best. It's kind of an export import type of thing rather than a live integration with version control. There are some weak spots with regards to API, scaling API security in Informatica. And that's where we're going to be leaning on Apogee as our API platform. You know, Kay and or others in Oddmess may have a different perspective. Our perspective on the Informatica tool so far has been, it seems to be really designed for kind of a single team and a shared trust domain to be working with. And so it's certainly possible to have segmented trust domains and things like that, but to some extent, it feels like you're kind of fighting the grain of the product a little bit in doing that. So it's definitely got some good things about it, and it's, you know, it's got its own quirks. Any enterprise software does, right?
again, a question that I feel like I should already know the answer to this, but okay, we have Snowflake and we have Informatica. You're talking about Informatica making data connections, and I thought that Snowflake handled those.
We're in this really interesting. Yep, we're in this really interesting space where, you know, to some extent, you always know that the tail of software is from, you know, kind of unique features into commoditization. And what we're finding in a lot of these platforms is that the integration components like connectors to other systems, synchronization tooling, API interface tooling and stuff like that is becoming more commoditized. Like when you buy a platform, there are some integration components that come along with it. So each one of these platforms that we buy ends up having integration tooling associated with it. And we have this good/bad problem of like, we have 5, 6, 7 different tools that we could use to do a particular thing. And we have to make institutional decisions about which is the right tool in the right setting. That's going to be an interesting one for us. Snowflake has some really interesting features for mass data ingest that, you know, that Kathy's team is much more knowledgeable about than I am. And those are things that, you know, there are definite advantages there. Using those tools outside of the Snowflake framework, I think a lot of it depends, you know, again, it depends, right? You got to look closely at what you're doing. Informatica's got some like high volume mass data ingest stuff too that we haven't looked too closely at. Yeah, we have a lot more options than we had in the past. There is some choice paralysis that happens with that, but what are you going to do?
It sounds very UW to me. So, oh, we have 9 ways to do it. Great.
Yeah. One of the things that we're trying to do, I touched in my talk, I touched on our integrate.data.wisc.edu integrator portal, which is a new website that we're coming out with that is, what we're really trying to do with that is to reach people that do integration work that don't realize that they're integrators. Like there's only a handful of people on campus that would say, hey, I do integration work, you know? There a lot of them are probably here right now, but it's not mainly what they do, right? You know, you're a web developer, you're a data analyst, you're an advisor, you're an associate dean, but you use data or you acquire applications or things like that. So really what we're trying to do with the Integrate Data portal is to speak to integrators in language that they would recognize, to be able to understand that, you know, what they do is it has an element of integration associated with it. So in sorting out like all of this tooling, what we want to try to do is to identify what are the common business tasks that you're trying to do, what tools are available to use those tasks, and without necessarily locking people into a box to say this is the only way to do it, but like these are the common ways that we see people solving those problems. And if you've got something that doesn't fit, we'd love to hear about it so that we can figure out, you know, when we see it again, what would we recommend?
So those maps that Sabrina was asking about, those paths that
Yep.
the 80% that we can get covered.
Right.
Chris had a question. I have an application that is querying info access crosswalk view. When will I no longer be able to query info access? And afterwards, how do I query the crosswalk?
Crosswalk. So you're trying to go from one identifier to another, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I'm querying NetIDs and PVI.
Okay. Yeah, we can provide kind of a basic replacement for that, you know, kind of a data table replacement for that through our identity integration service today. As we're working towards API deployment, we're going to be starting just after the Apogee rollout. Charlie's team is going to be focused on an identity API. Which really focuses on kind of core person information, things like that. Identifier translation is one of the things that'll probably be a part of that API. So if the modality that you're looking for is more database oriented with that, we can start with something like that right now. But if you're looking for something like API based, probably later this year, we'd be in a position to be able to talk about providing something like that. In the longer term, we're also thinking, you know, we're trying to push towards an event-based methodology that would allow us to be able to see, for example, you know, that you might have a queue that you could subscribe to, so that when somebody got a new identifier, you know, an existing employee got a student ID, somebody got a WISC card, a new person was created, and you needed to know about their identifiers. Then you would have a queue that you would be able to subscribe to, where an asynchronous process could be connected.
Okay, thank you.
A lot of our focus lately has been around getting the infrastructure in place to be able to provide those things. So I'm super excited to get beyond the infrastructure and into the content.
Will you give us a heads up a little bit when the crosswalk view is no longer queryable?
Yeah, I think that really kind of falls into whatever the you know, the retirement schedule for info access is going to be.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, this is Kay, and yes, we would definitely give people plenty of time to transition.
Thank you.
There is an oddness list we can subscribe to, Kathy? Is there a link you can drop for us?
It should be. I thought, Sanjana, did we put it in the presentation? It's on our website. It's
Yes, we
like
did.
Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yeah. I see there's a little bit of discussion about event-based infrastructure, and one thing I want to tell you folks about that we've been actually doing event-based infrastructure for compromised accounts on campus for quite some time. There's a queue that we have when security disables a compromised account. Rather than having to understand all of the systems that need to be notified about that, we've been using that as kind of a pub sub fan out for quite some time for internal processes and things like that. It's an interesting kind of modality that, you know, when you have potentially a large number of subscribers that need to know about something, that we can, you know, we can arrange for that without having to, you know, without having to have a synchronous integration with every one of those things. And David, I can follow up with you to get you some information about that if you're interested. We haven't done a good job of, you know, providing external documentation around that. I'll acknowledge that.
All right, do we have any last questions? We're at 2 o'clock now, and we have other content that's going to be happening at 2 o'clock, so we don't want to bump up against them too much. This will be recorded and available on the website, as well as any links that Tom wishes to have included.
Yeah, and if folks have questions or want to hear more about what we're doing, please feel free to reach out to me, and we can arrange for a conversation.
Sounds like a very large inbox. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Sanjana. And Randy, if they're still on the call.